Good evening. You're watching The Big Story. I'm Dylan Ang, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. Now, coming up on the show, the global coronavirus numbers. I'll also be speaking to our correspondent in South Korea on the country's latest measures in dealing with the crisis. But first, in Parliament today, Singapore is taking steps to reduce its carbon footprint. From 2023, all new vehicles purchased by the government will be cleaner and greener. For example, the Defence Ministry will be replacing its 400 administrative vehicles with hybrids and electric ones. The aim is to have all vehicles run on cleaner energy by 2040. Lim Chu Kang could also become Singapore's food bowl. Studies are underway to redevelop the Lim Chu Kang agriculture area. Singapore plans to boost its local food production to almost one-third of the country's needs by 2030. All secondary school students will have their own digital device by 2028. It will be progressively rolled out from June as part of plans to equip students with digital literacy skills. Students will also receive an EduSave top-up of $200 to support the purchase. Mental health education will also be a key priority in schools. This is part of the new character and citizenship education curriculum, which kicks in next year. All schools will have a support network made up of students to encourage them to help one another.
With stronger mental health education and peer support cultures, students will also be able to look out for one another and seek guidance from teachers and counsellors if they notice that a friend is struggling. The smallest, simplest gestures can make a difference. Anyone can do it. That's what makes peer support so powerful.
More emphasis will also be placed on cyber wellness education. Education Minister Ong Ye Kung said that this would help students cope with new pressures that arise from the prevalence of social media and smart devices.
We will devote more time and develop more materials to teach this subject so that students will learn to critically evaluate what they read online, be able to tell genuine news from falsehoods, and not rely on social media likes for validation. Values are what distinguish us from computers and machines that we cannot abdicate to technology. We apply our moral and value systems whether we are offline or we are online.
I'm now joined by Education Correspondent Amelia Teng. Now, Amelia, a lot was covered today on the education front, but let's start with the refreshed character and citizenship education curriculum that will kick in next year. Now, what specific concerns surrounding cyber wellness is the Education Ministry hoping to address with this?
Yeah, okay, so cyber wellness is something that comes along with a lot of concerns. I think young people today, like the minister said himself, are very different from previous generations, their parents, and the kind of exposure that we get from being in the digital world. And so the use of social media, smart devices is so commonplace today among students. And this has led to a whole host of different complex issues down the road. Things like digital addiction, gaming problems, cyber bullying. And when you extend this even further, you could get problems like that lead to sexual offenses, like even digital voyeurism, filming someone in the shower. And we see this a lot in the news today. So mental health issues is somehow closely related to cyber wellness. It's also been in the spotlight in Singapore for in recent years because increasing number of young people are coming forward to seek help for their mental well-being, and research has shown that this is mental wellness really needs to be tackled. If we want to improve our students, resilience, a sense of self-esteem and all that. And so I think the need for students to learn from young how to navigate like online spaces is very crucial, to use these spaces and resources responsibly and with a lot more discernment than they're doing right now.
So how will this curriculum look like, at the primary and secondary levels?
So as a whole, more time in general will be devoted to looking at cyber wellness issues, and more materials are being developed by MOE to teach this subject. But it's also not a completely new subject in a sense like math or English. It will just be weaved into a new character and citizenship education that syllabus that is being rolled out to schools starting next year. So broadly, schools will spend about 50% more time discussing cyber wellness issues. And for secondary schools, mental health will also be included in this new syllabus. So overall, CC will be further integrated into lessons and activities like cohort camps, CCAs, learning journeys, and all that lah. So every school experience can be a CCE lesson. Every teacher can be a CCE teacher. And also, in addition, primary schools will spend more time or place a greater emphasis on imparting moral values from young. And this will be in pupils' mother tongue languages to also kind of emphasize the use of MTL.
I see.
For secondary schools, yeah.
Go ahead.
Just one last point for secondary schools, they want to discuss more contemporary issues like cyberbullying, online media, climate change, and all these things will also be included in the new CCE.
Now, Amelia, just a final question for you. There's a lot of course, excitement with regards to bringing in these digital devices. But on the flip side, they can be a distraction too. Now, how can such devices be made useful for students?
Yeah, so primarily these devices are supposed to be used for. It can be like a laptop, an iPad, used to complement learning in classrooms and at home. So, but students will be disappointed to know that there'll be ways to control their usage time and screen time. So for one, they are blocked from downloading certain like gaming apps or accessing such websites, or you can't watch Korean drama on it. And the devices, you can also be programmed to turn off late night usage, like from after 12 midnight. So yeah, there's a limited functionality. And it needs to be done so that there's no misuse. But it's also similar to how mobile phones are not allowed during school time. Yeah.
Well, many thanks for joining us, Amelia. I've been speaking to Education Correspondent Amelia Teng on the latest from Parliament. Now do visit straitstimes.com for more. In Singapore, the Health Ministry announced 2 more cases on Tuesday night, taking the total number here to 110. Now, case 110 has links to the Wisland Technologies cluster. Meanwhile, contact tracing is underway for case 109, who had gone to work at Fish Mart Sakuraya in West Coast Plaza before he was admitted to hospital. But he had not served customers or handled food. The ministry also announced that no new patients were discharged, meaning the number of fully recovered people remains at 78. 7, though, are in critical condition. Overseas, Air New Zealand has confirmed a case on a February 25th flight from Singapore to Auckland. The female patient then travelled from Auckland to Palmerston North a few days later on March 2nd before returning to Auckland on the same day. Contact tracing underway involving passengers who were on the same Singapore service as well as the 2 regional flights. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has cited concerns for the 3 countries, Italy, Iran and South Korea, which have seen a spike in cases and are struggling to manage them. The WHO is also concerned about the pressure this virus puts on healthcare systems, even in countries with resilient systems in place. Over in the US, the death toll stands at 9 and the number of infected cases has surpassed 100. Cases in Italy continue to climb as well, with more than 2,500 people infected and 79 dead. But in China, the number of new cases fell for a 3rd straight day. The country reported 119 new cases on Tuesday, down slightly from 125 cases on Monday and 202 cases on Sunday. Meanwhile, South Korea saw 516 new cases, bringing the total number of infected cases to over 5,300. The death toll in South Korea stands at 32. President Moon Jae-in today announced a stimulus package of 11.7 trillion won, or 13.7 billion Singapore dollars, to cushion the impact of the outbreak. Subject to parliamentary approval, the supplementary budget will channel money to South Korea's healthcare system, childcare and outdoor markets. Now, to tell us more about the situation in South Korea is South Korea correspondent Chang Choon. Choon, nice to see you again. Now, a stimulus package of 11.7 trillion won. Now, can you elaborate on it?
Okay, this is the largest ever supplementary budget that South Korea has drawn up to fight infectious disease. It's bigger than the money that was put out for the SARS outbreak in 2003 and the MERS outbreak in 2015. So it was drawn up today. It will be submitted tomorrow, and they hope to pass it by March 17th. The money will go into areas such as enhancing the quarantine systems nationwide, establishing hospitals specialized in epidemics, and then also establishing research institutes that will focus on studying viruses. It will also go into providing financial support for hospitals, supporting the living costs of coronavirus patients who have to be quarantined for a very long time. And then it will also go into supporting SMEs that are suffering because of this outbreak. The government will, give out loans to these SMEs. And then the money will also go into disinfecting schools and public spaces. And they have also drawn up a budget for to help the low-income families and the elderly. They will issue like vouchers to about 5 million of these people over the next 4 months.
Now, Mei Choon, President Moon has also apologized for the shortage of masks. Now, how have they attempted to alleviate this?
Now public anger is really growing over this issue because people are queuing up early in the morning. Now it's winter, so you can imagine how cold it is. They're queuing in the morning to buy masks, only to be told later on when the shops open that the stocks have not arrived or it's already sold out. So President Moon has ordered the government to support manufacturers by securing raw materials for the manufacturers. South Korea has about 140 manufacturers for masks, and they can produce 10 million masks a day. 10% is for export, and then about 5 million will go, into the stores to be sold to the public. But you're not seeing this supplies in the streets because people are buying and hoarding. So the government is still trying to figure out what is the best way to manage this situation and how to distribute the masks fairly. They also want to distribute masks for free in Daegu. But it remains to be seen how they will do this. Meanwhile, people have taken the matters into their own hands, so they are doing things like reusing the mask, or they make their own. And then China actually sent 500,000 masks to Korea. It arrived yesterday. This is reciprocating South Korea's goodwill gesture much earlier.
Now, Mei Choon, let's focus on the topic of travel bans for a moment. Now, more than 90 countries have imposed entry bans and quarantine requirements on visitors from South Korea. Singapore is no exception, with the ban starting tonight. Now, what has the public reaction been to these restrictions?
I think Koreans generally understand that there's a need for these bans because South Korea's numbers are really shooting higher and higher. They know that it's inevitable, and South Korea would have done the same to protect its own people if the same happened. But people are upset at a few things. They're upset at how fast China banned South Korea, whereas when South Korea didn't have so many cases, they actually deliberated over the decision to ban Chinese tourists for a very long time, and in the end, they only banned those who have been to Hubei. Koreans are also upset when they hear stories about Korean people overseas being treated badly. Yesterday there was this picture of Koreans being locked up in a quarantine room that is like a prison cell, and people hope that Koreans can get more respect when they are overseas and this happens. There is also growing fears of racism against Korean people, especially among Koreans who are studying and living overseas. The picture of a Singaporean student who was beaten up in London, that picture actually was much circulated in Facebook in Korea as well.
Now, Mei Choon, let's just to end off, let's talk about the decision to push back the reopening of schools by a further 2 weeks. Schools will now reopen on March 23rd. Now, is delaying it by 2 weeks enough?
The reason why they delayed it to March 23rd is because there was a sudden spike in the number of patients below 19, and these patients are your students mainly. So there are more than 200 cases now. The government is worried that if you open schools, right, infections can spread very, very quickly in the schools. Also, the experts expect that the outbreak will start subsiding 2 months after the first case. So the first case in Korea was January 20th. Which means that it should start subsiding March 20th, which makes March 23rd which makes the reopening of schools on March 23rd a good day. But if the situation does not improve, I would think the government will push it back some more.
Well, thanks for taking the time to speak with us, Choon. Do stay safe. Now, that was South Korea correspondent Chang Choon with the latest. Now, keep up to date with developments in South Korea at straitstimes.com. Let's take a quick look at what's making headlines beyond our borders. Now, former US Vice President Joe Biden has likely reclaimed his status as frontrunner in the race to become the Democratic presidential nominee. He won in at least 9 of the 14 states up for grabs during the Super Tuesday primaries, including Texas. He also beat Elizabeth Warren in her home state of Massachusetts. But Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders looks to be way ahead in California. Once all the delegates are divided up, which could take days or weeks, Mr. Sanders could end up coming out of Super Tuesday with a very similar number of delegates to Mr. Biden. What seems clear is that this is now a two-horse race between these two. Malaysia's next parliament sitting has been postponed by 2 months to May 18th. The next sitting was originally scheduled for March 9th in just 5 days' time. But with a cabinet yet to be appointed, there wouldn't be a legislative agenda for the sitting. Opponents of the new government, including Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, have expressed concern that if parliament isn't convened soon, the new ruling party will have time to entice MPs to their side. And Japan's Olympic minister said that the Tokyo 2020 Games could be delayed from the summer until later in the year. This is, of course, amid fears of the coronavirus outbreak. The Games are due to be held from July 24th to August 9th. But under the hosting agreement, the right to cancel the Games remains with the International Olympic Committee. And IOC President Thomas Bach says he remains very confident that Tokyo will be able to host the Olympics at the specified time. And those are your top stories. Keep up to date with news in Singapore and around the world at straitstimes.com. I'm Dylan Ang. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.